We've got three short Bible readings from three different acts. So from the first act, Genesis chapter 1, verse 31 to chapter 2, verse 1. God saw all that he had made, and it was very good. And there was evening and there was morning, the sixth day. Thus the heavens and the earth were completed in all their vast array. From Act 3, Ecclesiastes chapter 5, verses 19 to chapter 6, verse 2. Moreover, when God gives someone wealth and possessions and the ability to enjoy them, to accept their lot and be happy in their toil, this is a gift of God. They seldom reflect on the days of their life because God keeps them occupied with gladness of heart. I have seen another evil under the sun, and it weighs heavily on mankind. God gives some people wealth, possessions and honour, so that they lack nothing their hearts desire, but God does not grant them the ability to enjoy them, and strangers enjoy them instead. This is meaninglessness, a grievous evil. And from the final act, number 6, and the last book of the Bible, Revelation chapter 22, verse 3 to 5. No longer will there be any curse. The throne of God and of the Lamb will be in the city, and his servants will serve him. They will see his face, and his name will be on their foreheads. There will be no more night. They will not need the light of a lamp or the light of the sun, for the Lord God will give them light, and they will reign forever and ever.
Good evening. How's it going? We're like halfway through this series in the fifth act. It's been fun. Sorry to disappoint you, but for the next few weeks, rather than guest speakers, you have Ron and I. Good response. I'm excited. We've been pretty excited. Ron and I feel a bit gypped because we have to wait for these guest speakers to get out of the way to really, it's our turn. Time to fly. It's so exciting to talk about enjoying life tonight. And I'm going to tell you about the structure that we're going to work through as we work through this one tonight. And kind of at the end of it, I just feel like there's more and more questions. And I'm pretty pumped about that. Because in a natural kind of postmodern sense, we kind of hate when someone just gives us an answer and we have to just do it, right? Kind of like, oh, don't tell me what to do. You kind of want to just, want to work on it and want to move through that. And that's the joy of what we're doing with this fifth act series, is that rather than the preacher being the end of the story, we're going to bring God's story to you each week, and you get to go out from that and be creative and go, well, what am I going to do now? How am I going to live in light of God's story? How am I going to exist in this space? And it's a wonderfully creative moment rather than a dogmatic moment. I love using the word dogmatic because it sounds really bad. Yeah. All right, tonight we're talking about no signal. That is not a lot of joy for me. While they fix all that for me, let me tell you about joy. A little thing about enjoyment is this. It is probably the universal human motivator. Let's think about that for a sec. I have learnt, leading people for a little bit, being a pastor for a little bit, and just being a dad and a husband and just living life, I've learnt that if I want people to do things, I need to find a way for them to enjoy them. If I'm taking my daughter to Bunnings, it is boring until I tell them there's a sausage sizzle at Bunnings. You have something people don't want to do, then add perks to it and people want to be involved. There's like this universal human desire for things that give us joy. It is so easy to say yes or no to something based on the enjoyment factor. And it's so interesting because there's some things that take no time at all, but we'll say no to them. Well, because they don't give us any joy. But then there's things that will take even longer, but we'll say yes to them because they give us joy. The distinguishing factor is not actually the activity at all, it's actually just that we would enjoy them. You can help someone move house, or you can watch 4 hours of Netflix. Helping someone move house will take 2 hours, but Netflix will take 4 hours. And yet the choice is very simple. You can spend 3 hours with friends, or you can help the house. Tough choices. It is in our very humanity, in our very desires, in the very way we exist that we just long for joy. We seek joy, pleasure, and happiness. There's a guy from the 16th and 17th century, Blaise Pascal, who said this. Oh, come back on. He said this. When he says men, he just means humanity in general. All men seek happiness. This is without exception. Whatever means they employ, they all tend to this end. The cause of some going to war and of others avoiding it is the same desire in both, attended with different views. They will never take the least step but to this object. This is the motive of every action of man, of humanity, even those who hang themselves. There is a universal desire for joy, and there is also another universal experience that we're well aware of, which is the not joy, right? We're well aware of those moments of joy, but we all just tangibly experience this moment of not enjoying something. From the day we are born, there is a moment of being hugged by your mum, and then there is a moment when you are not hugged by your mum, but a stranger at church. And that's not as fun. We have these moments, we know that, it's just a common experience. And the question is, why don't we enjoy life all the time? Sometimes things just aren't enjoyable, actually. There are things that just aren't that fun, that we have to do, that we're involved in, that are a part of our lives. Or there are things that give us joy, but it is so momentary that it just feels cheapened. And then there's other types of joy, other things that give us joy and pleasure and happiness that we get, but we almost live in constant fear of losing them. Like when you buy a new car, you're in constant fear for at least the first year that someone else is going to run into it. We want to enjoy life, yet we seem to be constantly be entering into it and then leaving it, or maybe never entering into it. But maybe here is the hardest thing of all, is that we constantly want it, and then we become enslaved to it. We constantly want joy, and we become enslaved to those things that give us joy and pleasure. Right, we have these good things. Let's list some good things. These sources of joy, they're good things in and of themselves. Relationships, career success, Netflix, the satisfying feeling of a headshot when you're playing Halo, the sweet taste of a strawberry dipped in melted chocolate, a job, our own strength, monetary stability, riding fast down a hill. Created things, not bad things, but good things, pleasurable things. I love these things. They make me feel good. Yet, that taste of that goodness, and we're well aware of the sour taste that sometimes follows. Relationships not living up to the expectations, so we jump to the next one to get out of it what we want. And we hurt the person we left behind. Someone gets in the way of your career, or gets in your way in your career, and thus becomes an obstacle to your enjoyment and potential, and the potential result is jealousy and contempt with that person. You're seeking for joy in that causes a brokenness. You watch every episode of every show you want to on Netflix and need a new source to supply your joy, and unwittingly turn to Stan, all the while avoiding the thing. Sorry, I should have paused for a joke. That was actually funny. All the while avoiding the fact that you may be responsible for other things than watching Netflix and Stan. But the fact is they don't give you joy. You finish eating the strawberry, thus the enjoyment ends, or you have 10 chocolate dipped strawberries and the enjoyment fades, or it doesn't fade and you have health problems because you have an oversupply of chocolate dipped strawberries in your lungs, or wherever they go. Stomach, right? The body and, the heart attack thing. Our strength fails, money is spent, or we can't earn enough money, or we lose some and we do whatever we need to get more. And when I say whatever we need, we really can do whatever we need. If your joy comes from money, you can do a whole lot of stuff that you just might think is okay because you want that money. You ride too fast down a hill, or the hill finishes, or you have to ride back up the hill. I've had mixed experiences with hills. Now, it doesn't cheapen the joy in those moments, right? There's still joy there. But It puts it in its place. We long for more joy and pleasure. And like busy bees looking for their next flower to get nectar from, we move from joy source to joy source. We need those things to give us pleasure, so we jump from need to need. We are enslaved to that need. We are driven by it. We're driven by YOLO and FOMO. You only live once. We have a fear of missing out. We need not fear enslavement to a dictator that's going to become our president or a prince or whatever happens and just take over our country. We don't need to fear that because we are willingly submitting ourselves constantly to another dictator, the desire for pleasure. And we willingly enjoy it. It drives our actions. It is our ruler. The fulfillment of pleasure, enjoyment, happiness leads us wherever it may. We are willingly enslaved despite the consequences. It's an interesting phrase, isn't it? Willingly enslaved. We want joy, pleasure, happiness. Universal desire is that for us. We have this tension, right? This tension that's created of sometimes it's just not that enjoyable. What are we going to do with that? We need an answer for that. Because it seems to be universal, we need this, but we need a better answer for that. We find we are enslaved to what we cannot hold. Before we get into that, before we get into God's story, I had some reflections about this topic in general, and it was just interesting that this was chosen. We gave you guys 20 topics, and you got to select them, and the top 7 selected ones were chosen. Enjoying life beat out consumerism, politics, war, and suffering. Why? Fascinating idea, right? As a social experiment of our church. Why do we want to know more about how to enjoy life than want to know about consumerism, politics, war, and suffering? I think it's because there's just a massive amount of confusion for us, really. Christianity's response to the idea of enjoying life has had a real mixed history. For some, there is knowledge of, at one time in different churches, there has been bans of alcohol, dancing, Harry Potter, all objects of enjoyment that have been cast aside, and therefore enjoyment seems to have been sheltered, as if there's a line that you can enjoy to. Like you can enjoy yourself as long as you restrict your idea to the pleasure of this short list. There's list over here, there's the bad list over here, and there's the good list over here. Stay in this list or you're in trouble. Christianity and enjoying life feels a bit like going to the school dance where the moves you're allowed to use are prescribed beforehand or distributed before the evening, and if you step into any other forms of dancing, you are discreetly asked to sit at the back. And the only song playing is Men at Work, Safety Dance. We can dance if we want to. We can leave your friends behind, because your friends don't dance, and if they don't dance, well, they're no friends of mine. But there just seems this potential guilt or confusion about enjoying life. I have a theory, and it has no grounding in anybody else but me, which means you completely ignore it. But I have a theory about why this is. I think that Christianity, particularly in Australia, has been defined more by what we are against than what we are for. What people hear loudly from our church is, we are not for that. What they don't hear loudly is what we are for. We are loud on issues that we don't want the world to take on. And therefore, it seems like we're against everything, because that's all they're hearing. Coke's advertising is open happiness and taste the feeling. Christianity's advertising has been to some, you can't do that and that and that and that, and definitely not that, particularly not that on that Sunday. The loudest thing that's heard about Christianity sometimes, this is just generalization, and it's totally my theory, don't quote me, is therefore pointed back to us. The statement that we make to the external outside to the church is what we hear back from our friends. And so Christians that think that, well, we're against stuff. And that's all we are. I think we have more to say. Well, that's the context. Now the scene has been set. For the rest of the sermon, I'm going to walk through the 6 acts, work through 1 through 4 and then 6, and that'll be brief. And then we're going to walk into the 5th act. And we're going to spend a whole bunch of time there, at least a third of the sermon, just kind of being creative in that space, raising questions, thinking about that, trying to work out what are we going to do there. Before we go there, let's jump into the story. First up, we have creation. If you're taking notes, the notes for this one are on page 8. Has anyone got their books? Anyone? Oh yeah, look at that. Win. Thank you. That was all for me. And for your learning. First act, creation. As we heard from the reading from Peter, we heard that God made everything and it was very good. As in it was right. It had that sense of satisfaction, that sense of goodness, that sense of it was all in the right place. And as we see in creation, as we see it begin, there's a rightness about the way the world is, and there's also a rightness about the way humans exist within it. They have a right relationship with humanity, with God, with each other, and with creation. Everything is good. Adam and Eve walk naked through the garden with no shame. They walk with God in creation. They get to name all the animals. They are part of it. It is all a wonderful place. There is not those things that we fear. There's not those things of loss. They never fear for hunger. They never fear for need. Everything is made available to them. They get to enjoy the wonder of things. They never fear that they will be too cold, clearly, because they're naked all the time. And there's all these things they never long for. Never fear of a loss. So therefore, I take it that what a joyful place it was. Human experience in the garden was enjoyable. And it's fascinating, even as you read through the end of the Genesis story, you see even that Adam and Eve are in the garden and they're serving God. They're working. I find that fascinating. In that they're in the garden and they enjoy working. There is no such thing as Monday-itis in the garden. There's no such thing as longing for the weekend. They enjoy the whole thing, all 7 days, all the time. They enjoy work. God says, I've got some overtime for you. And they're like, yes, I'm pumped. In the beginning in creation, it is a much better, happier place. Then we move to the fall. Important things to pick up here in the fall. Creation is still good. So the relationship is broken there between the Creator, humanity, and creation. All those things are broken through the actions of Adam and Eve. They deny God, they disobey God. And through that, those relationships are broken. And creation is cursed because of that. But creation is still good. Creation doesn't become a horrible thing. It becomes a place that is still good. It's still affirmed as a good thing. But the relationship that humanity has with that creation is very different. Humanity now experiences one of toil and longing for what was. Before work was fun, now work is not fun. Before relationships with each other were great, now relationships in the garden are not great. Adam and Eve attack each other, they hate each other, there's anger, there's a damaging relationship between them as a result of the fall. Because primarily the heart of the fall is this, a broken relationship with God. This is really important. As the vertical relationship with God in the garden is good, the horizontal relationship with everything else is also good. But when the vertical relationship with God is broken, is damaged, is hurt by the disobedience of Adam and Eve, the horizontal relationships are broken. Therefore, the experience of creation and of people within the creation is damaged. And then we get to the third act. And in this, we see Israel, the people of God. God's redeeming them, He's with them, He's blessing them. And we just see this constant story, this constant up and down that goes with Israel. They flourish under God, and they're cursed without God. So what happens is that there's different times when that vertical relationship seems to mend ever so briefly, and everything horizontal seems to go so well. But then they damage that again by worshipping another god or breaking that, and all of a sudden everything in the horizontal goes terribly. As we continue through that story, we also see there are moments of where they're enslaved to the things they replace God with. They make idols. They turn regular pieces of wood, created things, and they turn them into God things. Good things, creation is good, but they turn them into things that give them ultimate meaning, ultimate joy, ultimate sources of happiness. They pray to a piece of wood, and if it rains when they ask it to rain, they go, praise that piece of wood. It is their source of joy. And when it doesn't rain the next time, they start praying to that piece of wood. I'm not trying to ridicule them, I'm explaining exactly what happened. They're constantly replacing the Creator with creation. And lastly, joy from created things is given by the Creator. I love that reading from Ecclesiastes. It's just, it's a good one. In that it just describes these two realities, right? There's one person who God gives this one person possessions and wealth and everything the heart desires and the ability to enjoy them. And then another person, he gives everything, possessions, wealth, all their heart desires, yet they do not enjoy them. That sounds horrible. What an evil place to be, where you have all these things but you can't enjoy them. In some ways, it describes our reality a little bit. Through this whole story of Israel, we see moments and tastes of joy. It's like we're stepping in and out of the garden, stepping in and out of that right way, stepping into good times with the vertical, good times horizontal. And then it breaks again and again and again and again. And it's a repeated theme of God's people stepping into blessing and flourishing and then breaking out, stepping into joy and pleasure and satisfaction and hopefulness, and then constantly stepping out. It's a tape on repeat that is horrible. Then we get to the fourth act, where something really, really fascinating happens. In the fourth act with Jesus, we see the Creator and creation coming together. The fascinating moment, right? Where the vertical comes to the horizontal. They exist in the same person. Jesus lives out this perfect relationship with God, with the Creator, with Creator and with creation. And he brings us into, through him, a relationship with God and creation. That is his purpose. He comes in to undo the fall, to redeem the fall moment. When things are broken, to fix them, to bring them back. And in Jesus we have a good shepherd who gives life to the full. I love that passage in John 10:10, that he has come to give life to the full. Not to enslave, not to rob, but to give life to the full, which says to us that in Jesus our humanity is really, really loved and cared for. In Jesus, he actually wants to give us life, not rob life, not take away life. He wants to redeem that beautiful vertical that we might have horizontal joy. Something else Jesus does, which is really fascinating, in different passages, he will challenges people's object of people's desires. Sorry, he challenges people's desires, not the object of people's desires. So he doesn't say, stop earning money. But he says, what does that money mean to you? He doesn't say, stop getting married, stop having friends, stop working. But he does say, what do those things do for you? Why are you using them? What are you using them for? He challenges their desires rather than just the object of their desires. And here's the best thing. Jesus becomes the ultimate source of joy. And here's why. This is really important. Here's why. Jesus becomes the ultimate source of joy because in him we have the gateway to the kingdom where all those things that were lost in the garden are renewed and redeemed. In him, we don't have an impermanent solution where the vertical is fixed for a little bit and then it's good with the horizontal and everything's great and then it's broken. We have a permanent solution where our humanity is recognized, where we were meant to be. We are in Jesus, we are brought into a kingdom where we are what we were created to be. And so all those things where we seek for joy and are burdened by them and are enslaved to them, well, they no longer need to be. We're not trying to replace God anymore. God has come to us that we might have him. He is the ultimate source of joy because he gives us enjoyment in creation beyond what we can imagine. Because in him, the world is made right again. To quote Ron, bad things are made good again. It makes a massive difference for our joy. A massive difference. And there's one little tidbit that comes at different parts in Jesus' time, just a little bit at the end there, that there's joy in suffering. It's fascinating the number of times and number of letters of Paul and God's people after Jesus that they are suffering and they've lost everything. Paul's in jail. He's lost all things. He's lost contact with the friends he loves. He's lost all his money. He's lost all his possessions. He's lost everything, and yet he has joy. In 1 Thessalonians, the people of God, they become Christians, and their families disown them and throw them out. Can you imagine going home tonight and your parents say, "Go away, you're not living here anymore," because you went to church? And in that moment, they feel sad. Like, let's not pretend that it's not sad. They're still suffering. But in the midst of their suffering, there's joy. That is incredibly messed up and amazing at the same time. How do you get that? What is going on there? There's a hope that is in Jesus there, which is just so much more. For in Jesus, he is our ultimate source of joy. And in Jesus there, we see that even when the world is falling around you, you can still have joy in him because you have a hope for so much more. Every time we see that in Paul's letters and in the New Testament there, we see constantly this sense of joy, even when everything around you is falling apart. There's this constant reference to a hope for something more. The hope where bad things are made good again. The hope for the kingdom to come that we are living in now. The hope for something better than what we have. And finally, in the sixth act, we have this, a little side point. You have bodies when you go to heaven. That'll become important in a second. But it is really important to know that. There's been a period of time when there was teaching from Christianity where it was like, when you die, you lose your body, and you just become this spirit. And in heaven, we get to float around like floaty angels that are whispery and airy and like clouds. But it's actually really important. When you get to heaven, you will look like you. You'll have a body. You will eat. You will drink. Those things that you enjoy now as a human being in your body will still be true in heaven. You'll still enjoy those things. You'll still want to have a meat pie in heaven. You'll still want to have a sweet steak. You'll still want to have a hug from a friend. There's good things about that. When we think about the sixth act and the final new creation, we're thinking about the creator to creation relationship is fully redeemed. As we experience it now, as we think about the fourth act, Jesus bringing that in, there's a sense in which we don't fully experience it. Because we know there's stuff that's still stuffed up. We know that there's still that lack of full enjoyment. And yet when we get to heaven, when we get to that new creation, that creator-creation relationship is fully redeemed. And just like in the garden, we will walk with God again. We will walk with God again. And we'll get to ask him all the questions we have about all this stuff. We'll walk with him again. And the last one, which it's picked up in that reading that Peter gave for us from Revelation 22, verse 3. We'll still serve in heaven. Like, I remember when I was growing up and watching The Simpsons, the idea of heaven was you sat around watching TV all the time. And you got to do all the things that you really liked. Well, I mean, one part of that's true. In heaven, we still serve, but you enjoy it. In heaven, you get to do these good things for God, and you enjoy it. You get to work hard, and it's satisfying and good for your soul. Those are all the acts. And now we jump to the fifth act, for which I must move this. In this space, in the fifth act where we exist now, there's an opportunity for creativity. We've heard this story of the brokenness of the vertical, which affects the horizontal. But in Jesus, that vertical is fixed, that the horizontal is put in place. And as we think about enjoying life, we're thinking about that idea of enslavement to the things that we long for. These are just a whole bunch of thoughts that I had thinking through this creatively. So I'm just going to walk through them and just throw out ideas here. And this is not a moment where you go, oh, Miles said it, so therefore it must be true. This is a moment for you to go, Miles said it based on this story. Do I agree with him because of this story? Do I want to say more? Do I want to say less? I'll try and be really controversial at some point, just so you can argue with me later. I'll try. I'm not very good at it. First thing, created things are good, and therefore it's how you use them that matters. I think this is fascinating. Created things are good, they're not inherently bad. The problem is found in humanity's relationship with created things rather than the things. I've noticed this heaps recently, particularly with, what was it? The school's website, not the school's website, a website set up by a whole bunch of students where they were collecting pictures of girls, and they stored them on this website. What a horrible thing, right? Just devastating. They were illegally taking pictures from girls' accounts and Snapchat accounts, and they get them rated on this site. Horrible. But even worse for me was reading these articles about people blaming the internet and blaming the schools, or blaming the culture. And I was like, the issue is not the culture. I mean, the issue is not the schools. The issue is not the internet. The issue is the kids. Right? The issue is not the thing. The issue is the people that are responsible for that. Rather than slamming particular things, we need to recognize that things are good in themselves. They're created and they're good and they're useful for wonderful things. The internet has capacity for an amazing amount of good, which it is used for. It also has a capacity for an amazing amount of evil, which is totally based off humanity. In and of itself, it is a good thing. I love this quote from Martin Luther. Martin Luther is a guy from the 16th century, changed the church forever by writing 99 sentences down. Amazing. But he has this quote, and it's good. I'll read it. Men can go wrong with wine and women. Shall we then prohibit and abolish women? The sun, the moon, the stars have been worshipped. Shall we then pluck them out of the sky? As if it's the thing's fault. No, God's story shows us that created things are good and have the potential for great good, to be enjoyed. But it's potentially us it's us that's the problem. Which means that there is freedom to enjoy a whole bunch of things in your life. There's not a restriction on that. There's not a Christian idea of what enjoyment is. You can be a Dungeons and Dragons nerd and still come to our church. I know. You can be a Liverpool supporter and still come to our church. You can go LARPing. Does anyone know what LARPing is? Yeah, there's like 3 or 4 people. LARPing is live action role play, where you dress up as like knights and wizards and warriors and you'd run around a field throwing spells at each other pretendingly. So cool. I just think it sounds awesome. I've never done it. I probably never will. But you can be a LARPer and come to our church. You can like surfing and come to our church. You can like dancing and come to our church. You can like beards and come to our church. You can not like dressing like a hipster. You can like dressing like a hipster. You can do whatever you want. There's a whole bunch of things you can enjoy. Enjoy them. There is a freedom there to wonderfully enjoy them. There's not a Christian-defined idea of enjoyment in that space. There's good things that we may enjoy. Which brings me to the next point. Created things are to be enjoyed. And I would argue that they become even more enjoyable as a Christian. I would argue that you can enjoy the created things more than if you don't believe in God. We enjoy things as they are created to be, and we enjoy them more because we don't need to become enslaved to them. We don't need them, we get to enjoy them. If you need something, if you're burdened by needing it, then it has control over you and therefore undermines your enjoyment of life. For Christians, wine tastes sweeter, steaks are juicier, created things are opportunities for joy rather than things we need or can't enjoy ourselves. Under God, epic things are enjoyable, given by God. I think we could enjoy them even more than if you weren't a Christian. Because we're not constantly longing for them and running around for them. We're not the busy bee anymore, constantly jumping from different source of joy to joy. We're not constantly using other things as resources for ourselves anymore. But rather, we get to enjoy them. And perhaps enjoy them even more. because they're put in their place in the created order, the way things were meant to be. Another little thing about that under created things are to be enjoyed is this. We have bodies, therefore we enjoy creation physically. We are not simply souls with bodies that are going to get rid of and then the souls are going to float around as wisps in the air. There was an idea in church history that all you need is God, your Bible, and a dark room, and you'll be happy. There was a movement called asceticism, for the nerds out there. That's how monks came around, right? That everything that is not of the godly type is to be cast out, outside the church, outside of our walls. To avoid any form of indulgence, self-denial at all costs, almost an idea of you can't enjoy the things of creation at all. And sometimes we take that on ourselves. Sometimes we shame people for enjoying particular things. Christians are good at that sometimes. I think this leads to a bit of guilt about enjoying ourselves in particular things. But under God, we enjoy things physically. Being a Christian isn't just about sitting in your room each day and just reading the Bible all the time. Reading the Bible is good. Don't stop doing that one. But it's not what it's about. It doesn't stop there. Under God, we enjoy the world physically. We go for walks on the beach, enjoy His creation. We ask a friend for a hug. We drink a beautiful wine. We enjoy a conversation. We feel the pleasure of seeing a friend smile. We watch a movie that challenges us or makes us laugh. We buy things for good. We serve others. And we experience the joy of thankfully serving another. You can be enslaved to those things, right? Those things, you can need them so much that they are a burden to you, that you must trap down, that you need to hold on to them so much or you won't be happy in your life. But if your joy is so much in Jesus, then you can enjoy them as they are without burdening yourself with them. Last one. Good things that aren't enjoyable can become sources of joy. Good things that aren't enjoyable can become sources of joy under the greatest source of joy. It turns out that serving can be enjoyable. It turns out that doing hard things can be enjoyable. I read a book a couple of years ago. Parents are going to love this. It's called A Theology of Washing Up. Yeah. That was totally you, Karen Shaw. I saw that. You can do the washing up with joy. I'm going to let that settle for a second, because you don't believe me. But let's not pretend that it's enjoyable in and of itself. It can be enjoyable under God because it serves God's purposes. It's put in its right place. It could be something you would avoid because you're just longing for joy in other places. But when your joy is in Jesus, you can do something hard because it serves God. God loves bringing order out of chaos. God loves acts of sacrificial love for another. Washing up serves both these wonderful purposes. As you wash up, you are doing something that someone else doesn't have to do now. Geez, that's good. Isn't it like that's a really cool thing. As you wash up, you are freeing someone else up from having to do something. There's a joy in that only comes from a joy in the Lord. And God loves bringing order out of chaos. If you've seen my house at the moment, bringing order out of chaos is right on the money. And here's the thing. What that means is that all things we have been given to do are opportunities for good. All things. To glorify God. They have a value, and this can be enjoyable. For some of us, we only do things because they're easy. Easy equals happiness. Easy equals pleasure. It's the path of least resistance. For others of us, we do things because they give us freedom. Freedom equals happiness, path of least restriction. But in God's story, despite its ease or freedom, it is enjoyable because it's good. Because it's a created good. Serving, doing good, not for your own benefit, but because we can. We're a part of God's story, and Jesus is our greatest source of joy. We are freed from our constant need to use everything around us for our joy. We go from being a black hole pulling in joy from all sources around us to a star that can give light to all around us. Rather than our friendships and our homes and our relationships and our jobs being things that we suck joy out of to fulfill ourselves, as we're resting right in Jesus, there are opportunities to serve and do good. What a great blessing. Imagine if that was just true of everyone in the world. It'd be amazing. That's what heaven's like. It's an amazing place where, rather than trying to sap joy from everyone else, we're all rejoicing in Jesus, and we're just trying to be a blessing to each other. That's what God's kingdom is like. It's what God's kingdom can be like in us. In God's story, we can find ourselves in a relationship where joy is constant, unearned, given that we can now be a blessing and do good for others. Our responsibilities, those things we have to do, those things we need that we were given to do, they're not things to run from. They're not things that rob our joy, but they're opportunities to give joy to others even. It's interesting how we often change what we are doing to make life more enjoyable. We quit jobs, we leave relationships. I was about to say we walk away from churches, but I felt like it was a cheap shot, so I didn't say it, but then I said it afterwards. Maybe rather than changing the thing we are doing when we need, what we need is, we need our hearts to be changed and our motivation changed for doing that thing. I have met furniture removalists who are more content and enjoy life than most university students. And they get up at 5 a.m. every day, they get in a truck, they go into a stressful situation, but they're contented. I have met people who have quit jobs in less than a week of starting because it wasn't fun. In God's story, there's just this interesting moment where we can do mundane things for longer because they're good. That's just so upside down. We can stay in friendships rather than abandoning them when they're hard. We can stick with jobs because they're a good thing. We can stay with responsibilities rather than trying to hide from them. Only, though, when our joy is found in Jesus and not in those things. Only then. Only then are we free to do that, to enjoy all things in life. Christians can enjoy good things that, without Jesus, no one thinks are good. You can say yes to doing things that won't give us pleasure because we have a greater pleasure in Jesus. I have one last pastoral note, and then I finish up. I have this massive question. What about when life isn't enjoyable? Like, if we're going to exist in the fifth act here, we're going to exist in the reality of life and doing that with God's story and God's kingdom speaking to us now. There's a reality of mental health is epic in terms of this conversation. Because it could sound right now that I'm just telling you to enjoy life, and there's lots of people here that are going, I haven't enjoyed things in weeks. And I'm just a jerk for pointing that out to you. I've got a few thoughts on this. The first is that since we are bodily, we are affected by our bodies. So sometimes we are sad and feeling the weight of sadness or feeling the weight of a different situation, anxiety, or whatever it may be. We're feeling that for a prolonged period of time, and part of the solution to that is enjoying something bodily. Sometimes you really do just need to walk on the beach and enjoy the sunshine and have fresh air brush on your face. Sometimes that will be the greatest rejuvenating thing for you of all. That as you're enjoying Jesus, you get to enjoy your things bodily. We are bodily beings that we need input, we need to enjoy those things. We can't just hide off and have a sacrificial thing where we're burdening ourselves so much that we don't enjoy our world around us. There are times when you need to enjoy the sunshine. There have been times when I've come into work and I'm just so angry all morning. And then I have morning tea. It turns out I just didn't have breakfast, so I was just really hungry. But I'm bodily, right? So it affected my way of doing life. There are periods of time when people will work for 10 days straight and they wonder why they're angry at their husband or wife. Dude, it's because you're working too hard. You haven't rested. You haven't enjoyed. You haven't bodily sat in what you can be. But this bodily nature of us says another thing. This is really important. Since we are bodily, we also have chemicals going in our brain that shape how we experience the world. So even if things are enjoyable, we can't enjoy them because of how the chemicals in our brain are working. We are bodily. And it is good and right and normal and fine, and we love you still, for you to see a professional that gives you medication that can help you, help your brain chemicals to work differently. That is a good thing. We live in a blessed time where we can help you and look after you. And we'll walk with you through that. But in this world of enjoying life, you're bodily, and sometimes you need some help to enjoy life. I've told this story before, I think I've told it here, but I have a friend of mine who suffered from manic depression for 25 years. I've talked to him about joy, and he said his hope in Jesus for eternity doesn't fix his depression. It doesn't make him jump around with happiness. But it does give him joy in the midst of suffering. And he is so thankful that he knows Jesus. He's so thankful that he has a hope of all things being fixed again. To the point where he said, even though he has depression, there is joy in Jesus for him. Enjoying life is much more than our circumstance. For some, it is something much harder than just going to our next flower to make us feel happy. It doesn't undo depression, but it gives him joy from the hope in the midst of his suffering. My final point is, and then I'm really going to finish. I think I finished twice already, so I'm sorry. I get confused. Oh, what about when life isn't enjoyable? Genuine question, right? So you've got mental health stuff, that's important. But what about there's just you not enjoying yourself? Let's get super practical. In the fifth act, what if you just don't enjoy things? It could be that's not a good thing. It could be that you're trying to source something for your joy that is not actually good. You could be using it in a bad way. You could be just holding on to something that is not okay. You could be enslaved to it and burdening it with something that it can't hold. For example, if you're in a relationship with someone and they're your ultimate source of joy, if you're constantly looking to them to fulfill you, well, you're burdening them with something that they can't be. They are a good thing. They're a human that needs to be loved as well. But only in Jesus can you enjoy that relationship to all its flourishing beauty. You can become enslaved to a relationship, or a relationship can be a joy and a flourishing and something that you can enjoy that is good. Let me finish with this. In the fifth act, we can enjoy life. We really can. And here's how we enjoy it. It is found in being able to say no or yes and be contented with that choice. Imagine that. Imagine being able to say no or yes to opportunities, but still be contented. Still have joy and a hope for something so much more. Rather than being driven by YOLO and FOMO, being able to rest in the present, be contented. That is real joy. That is really enjoying life. Where you aren't enslaved to things, but you just get to use them for their good. To really enjoy life is to have our greatest joy in Jesus, freeing us from looking for our joy in other places, freeing us for looking to other things for what God can only provide. We get to enjoy things as they are. In the fifth act, we really can enjoy life because of God's story and God's kingdom. Let me pray. Father, we thank you so much for life, and in you we hope for life to the full. And Father, as we think about enjoying life and all the things and the burden that sometimes comes with that, with the enslavement to needing things, Father, I pray that you would help us see the wonder of you and the wonder of hope for you in the future. that we might have more than we could ever imagine in you. There is safety, there is peace, and all the brokenness that we experience in the present is wonderfully redeemed by you. May our vertical relationship with you be so fixed and redeemed that in a horizontal we may enjoy things as they are. For your glory. In Jesus' name, amen.